Good evening and welcome to the latest on Australia's house price slump. It's the first time a drop in the average price of dwellings has been recorded since September 2020. Tonight, we'll hear what's causing the slowdown and also talk to a leading economist on concerns about the Reserve Bank ahead of another interest rate rise. Joining me now in the studio is Network Finance Editor Gemma Acton. Gem, good evening to you.
Hi, Michael.
Talk us through some of where the biggest falls in house prices have been.
Well, this is very much concentrated to Sydney, Melbourne and Canberra, which saw in May the first drop it's had since 2019. But really, apart from that, Sydney and Melbourne is where we're seeing this. Every other city and region is still seeing growth. Now, admittedly, that growth is slowing down. Take somewhere like Hobart, which saw really fast growth ahead of the pandemic and during the pandemic. Some suburbs there are seeing falls and growth there has really slowed down. Some Brisbane suburbs are seeing falls, even though overall there's still growth. The two cities that are really bucking the trend are Perth and Adelaide. Although it is worth noting that the median house price there is a lot lower than elsewhere. In Sydney, the median house price is still around 1.1 million. In Perth, it's around $500,000, and in Adelaide, about $630,000.
So if the brakes are on in our biggest centres, Sydney, Melbourne, is that a trend? Is that going to continue?
It will continue, most likely, because the drivers of that slowdown are still in place and are still relevant. For instance, interest rates. As you mentioned, we had the first interest rate hike last month, and we've been told to brace for several more. Banks wasted no time in passing that on to mortgage holders, and at a time when all our other costs are going up as well, it really makes a difference if you're paying a bit more even on your monthly mortgage repayments. Also, housing stock's an interesting one to watch. Housing stock levels are still really depressed compared to historical averages, down around 10% across the country compared to a year ago, and around 28% lower if you look at the 5-year average. But they're starting to pick up in Melbourne and Sydney. You're actually seeing higher stock now than a year ago in those cities, and it's winter. This is not a traditionally strong selling season, so as we move into spring, we can expect stock levels to pick up even further. The last thing to note is consumer sentiment. It's really depressed right now, well below long-term averages, and people don't get excited to rush into buying something major like a house when they're feeling this low. I would just caution, despite this pullback and a slight fall in certain places, house prices are still 27% higher than where they were pre-pandemic. So a long way to go before that's lost. Yeah.
What about rental prices though? Because they're quickly going up. Is that a national trend? Or?
Yeah, very much so. So in May, rents went up across Australia by around 1%, which is a lot in the space of a month. Over the last year, in the cities by around 9%, in the regions by around 11%. What we're seeing is unit rents now rise much more quickly, which is not very surprising as compared to house rents, given that with the borders reopening, we're seeing migration start to pick up again, and unit rents is where you'll see that pressure. And that's just starting to come back. You know, migration is nowhere near the levels it was. There's a lot of catch-up to do there. So this pressure can be expected to continue. When you talk to organisations that look after Australians who are struggling, a lot of them call it a rental crisis.
Yeah. All right. Gemma, thank you for that.
Thanks, Michael.
The Reserve Bank's interest rates decision next week comes amid heavy scrutiny, with new Treasurer Jim Chalmers about to order a major review of Australia's central bank. 12 leading economists have written an open letter on the matter, asking the Treasurer to ensure the planned review is conducted independently. One of those who crafted the letter is Assistant Professor of Economics and Business. So today, the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen conceded her government got it wrong on how sharply inflation rose. In the Reserve Bank's interest rate rise last month, the Governor, Philip Lowe, said inflation picked up, quote, more quickly than expected. Just have a listen now to Lowe's prediction last year of no rate rises until 2024, then his messaging after last month's board meeting. Have a listen.
We do not expect it to be before 2024, and it's possible that it will be later than this.
It is now time to begin withdrawing some of the extraordinary monetary policy support that was put in place to help the Australian economy during the pandemic.
All right, so the question there, Stephen, is have our global institutions just completely missed the mark on interest rates and inflation?